Hello. Welcome to week 10. We're going to be watching Bryant Cook versus Rudy Briksza. I'm joined by Phil Gallagher. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself, Jarvis?
Pretty well. Kind of got off work slightly early to rush home because they needed some help, but a little bit tired. But I'm excited to watch some Magic. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, this is always one of the highlights of my week, right? You get to see some awesome legacy coverage, maybe better than what you're going to see the rest of the week, even if you're actively watching some streams. We can't ask for much better than this.
Right. So I'd like to take a look at the deck lists for this first match if we could. I think we're going to be in for sort of a surprise.
So what's on the line here? Like, where are we at in terms of this tournament, Jarvis?
Good point. I believe these matches are, well, for Rudy and Bryant, this is not an elimination match, is it? Or is it?
It is not.
It is. It is an elimination match. All right. So, yes. The loser of this match, it looks like they're dead. They're just gone from the competition. The winner of me and Brian's match has to win 2 matches to take the trophy.
So we're at the point where things are really starting to matter. We are very quickly approaching sort of our grand finals event. So this week we're going to have 2 matches, and then each of the following 2 weeks will only be a single set of matches. We'll have losers finals next week, and then grand finals 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting time.
Looking at the bracket here. Sorry, never mind. I'm looking at chat. Never mind.
So it's not single elimination. That's what I wanted to clarify. The bracket is a little bit confusing, but the red arrow indicates that loser drops down to the losers bracket and plays against the winner of me and Brian. I believe that is what that means. So it's not quite a single elimination match, but in the end, a win here is great for them. That guarantees second or first place, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
just
to clarify everything once and for all for chat, our first set of matches for the night is going to put someone into the losers bracket. Our second best of 5 tonight is going to be for elimination.
Yes. So yeah, a lot's on the line. There's at least a difference of some amount of money, but just having that guaranteed position in the grand finals is great.
Right. This isn't about the money. This is about the pride.
Honor and glory.
That's what we play Magic for.
Oh yeah. All about those honor points and glory points. Yeah. I'm excited to see the Bryant versus Rudy match upcoming. But now I think we should take a look at the deck lists. All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
This appears to be a Briksza's control deck.
So a lot of these decks recently have sort of taken on some slight changes from what we had seen previously. Obviously Deathrite Shaman is gone, but one of the common things that has found its way into the deck now is Preordain.
Right.
So just giving the deck a touch more consistency. Is there anything else in the main that sort of stands out to you, Jarvis?
The biggest change, in my opinion, is the addition of the 4th basic land. Reed Duke was advocating for this in his most recent article. I think it's a good change with the rise of back to basics, more wastelands, and even it's like effective versus death.
So there's lots of D&T, or more generally, lots of wasteland. We're just a couple of weeks away from seeing Assassin's Trophy as well, and that's going to reward having the basic lands.
So just having the 4th basic, I think, makes you a lot better versus wastelands, and back to basics is the bigger one that you've seen the rise of.
So the sideboard has a whole bunch of singletons with sort of broad applications, everything from engineer explosives to deluge to hydroblast to needle. Sort of like one of the only things that's really maybe not overrepresented, but that's represented in many copies is surgical extraction, which has huge value with the 3 copies of Snapcaster Mages that we're seeing.
Yeah, and another thing to point out is you shouldn't view the Preordain as a singleton, you should view it as the 9th cantrip, I think.
Agreed.
If you view it that way, that makes your sideboard a lot more accessible in the postboard games, as long as you don't side out any cantrips, which I think most people will never touch in this sort of deck. So I think that's one of the attractions of playing one of these Xeroxy decks. Okay. Sorry. Slight confusion. He is playing Miracles first. A lot of things we said are actually true for this sort of deck as well.
So
pretty standard. You've seen the rise of accumulated knowledge, and the reason you did not see that before, I think, is Deathrite Shaman. Would you agree with that, Phil?
Absolutely. I also think Legacy as a whole slowed down a touch, making accumulated knowledge better in that regard too. Like, accumulated knowledge is awesome if you're going to be playing against things like Miracles, Grixis Control, D&T, where you do have time to cast the, second, third, maybe even fourth in some games, copies of those cards. Whereas when the metagame's a bit faster, Predict, though clunky, is probably better.
Yeah, there's been a huge debate about the difference between those cards. I think in order to determine which one is better, you would have to know a lot more about a tournament than you're ever going to know. So I think you can kind of just do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think players are making these decisions based a lot on gut feel, and the difference between them at the end of the day probably is not sweeping. Though it does make the accumulated knowledge mirrors really cool.
Yeah, about that. You basically just never want to cast the first one. In the postboard configuration, this looks a lot like the list that Lawrence Harmon was championing. I think it's like probably 1 or 2 cards off, but it looks very, very close. So yeah, it's pretty stock. The only notable thing in the sideboard, I think, is the counterbalances in the sideboards of the main deck.
Yeah, and I think Miracles is still a very similar control deck to what it used to be, but previously, whereas it utilized counterbalance for a lock, these days it's really almost a back-to-basics deck. That card has been so crushing to a huge percentage of the format, and I think that's one of the reasons actually why Miracles is quite good right now.
And one other thing that it's weird, Back to Basics is actually good versus a lot of monocolor decks, even like your beloved Death and Taxes. Shutting off the Rashadan ports, the Caverns, the Caracases, the Canopies, those have huge value.
I can't overstate how good Back to Basics is against D&T. Like, I'm even playing, I think, 14 basic planes, and that card is still rough in a lot of games.
It's because I think you need the Rashadan ports to compete with more powerful decks.
Agreed.
But yeah, I'm excited to see what happens.
So let's see what's on the other side of the table now.
Wow.
Oh, man.
This is
good, clean Magic right here, folks. Get your chalices while they're hot.
Magic? Do you mean a deck that was essentially banned from Modern for looking like this?
I love me some Chalice of the Void as sort of a taxi, control-y prison player. I just love seeing this card.
I'm going to admit a secret to you. I had access to this deck at the Pro Tour where it broke out, and I chose not to play it. That's one of the biggest regrets of my Magic career. Yeah, so this deck originally debuted at Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch. My teammate, JC Tao, won the Pro Tour with it. He beat all of the colorless Eldrazi decks because having colors in your deck was actually an advantage in the mirror. But, this deck is phenomenal. Just look at its mana base, count the number of soul lands, and count how likely it is to do a broken thing. It's just phenomenal.
Eldrazi is a deck that gets so much value out of its land compared to most other decks in the format. Some of them are creatures, most of them are soul lands, or otherwise have some effect. Even like the Urborg, which on the surface just taps for 1 mana, enables you to do some broken things with Eye of Ugin.
Yeah, just like an Eye plus an Urborg implies an endless 1 for 4. Note that Eye plus Urborg does not let you cast Thought Knots here, though. There's been
it's a touch awkward.
There's been a few game rule violations now and then for that sort of thing. But, yeah, the plan with this deck, hope you have a soul land in your opener, slam a chalice for 1, then start deploying some giant undercosted creatures that disrupt your opponent. Like, Reality Smasher is not easy to kill. And here's one thing I love. 4 Walking Ballista.
I don't love that. I don't love that at all.
Well, I love it because I think it makes a lot of sense. It gives you insurance for flooding in the late game. It also lets you be better in matchups like Death and Taxes,
It's
which is probably why you don't.
It's not fair. Walking Ballista is so good, in all seriousness, folks. I've been super impressed with that card. I've even been playing it in Death and Taxes myself, and I can't even cheat on mana as much as this deck can.
No, but yeah, this is going to be an interesting matchup. On paper, who do you like for this matchup?
I think it's hard to say because every time I ask someone what they think about this matchup, they tell me something different. I'm going to root for Eldrazi because I think the early Chalice of the Void does a surprising amount of work in this matchup, and Eldrazi can come out of the gates fast enough with just like the Thought-Knot Seer and the Reality Smasher openings that it's hard to let your cantrips do what they need to do sometimes.
Right, and here's another thing. You really lean really hard on Terminus after the Chalice hits. It's incredibly awkward. So I would also take the Eldrazi side, but I guess I'll take the Miracle side since you've taken the Eldrazi side.
I don't think it's like a landslide in either direction, but I would guess that Eldrazi is slightly favored.
Oh, nice. So we're down to the match, and we have some opening hands. Appears Rudy has won the die roll. His hand looks good.
Yeah, his hand is I would consider pretty good blind. Like it lacks a cantrip, but he has early spell-based interaction, two potential counter spells. It's maybe not going to be ideal here, but we'll see how that goes.
But note, Bryant does not have a soul land in his opener.
And that's pretty big.
Yeah. The difference between a turn 1 Chalice and a turn 2 Chalice on one is pretty big a lot of the time, I think.
Yes. Mike, I don't know if you can fix this, but I'm hearing myself on echo now all of a sudden.
If you turn the stream sound off, that might fix it.
Stream is off for me.
Oh. Okay, anyways, so we're going to see a Chalice for 1 on turn 2. It's still going to force a force of will, I think, out of Rudy. Because not being able to play with your Swords of Plowshares versus a deck like this is really debilitating. And Flusterstorm is such a dead card. Whoa, back to
Oh my gosh.
That's a phenomenal draw. That might actually be game ending. Just a double Stone Rain, one-sided.
Life is going to be very hard for Bryant now.
Yeah,
like, he has lots of lands, but he can't actually go and do more than one spell with any of them. Although the Eye of Ugin can allow him to cast smaller things like Eldrazi Mimic and Endless Ones without tap.
Terminus not the best draw there. A land would have been phenomenal. I think Jace probably ends the game on the spot. But instead, Magic is going to keep happening. And the City of Traders being a one-shot deal here is not a big deal, actually. If you're going to have to use a land once, City is the best one to lose to that. And the Jace goes. Obviously, if Rudy had drawn a land and gotten to play the Jace, things would have been very good for him.
All right, so how can Bryant win this game? Does he have to go and play another Thought-Knot Seer to try to disrupt more? Does he just have to jam another Endless one now and just pray? What do you think is his path to victory?
I'd be inclined to wait until Thought-Knot. Alternatively, you could just play a 2/2 Endless one.
Yeah, I think I like playing 2/2 Endless one this turn into Thought-Knot the following turn.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you see from Bryant. This also opens up, if you draw a soul land, you can play Reality Smasher, which is phenomenal as well.
Yep.
So I think Rudy actually needs to draw a Plow or a Brainstorm.
That's an interesting draw.
Interesting draw. We're going to need to draw some spells for it.
Yeah, as soon as he hits some cantrips and he can really start firing things off, he might be okay. But if he whiffs for another turn or two, things could get bad.
See, this was interesting. Bryant was willing to trade Thought Knot for 2 creatures, and I think that is absolutely fine to offer that trade.
Yeah, the Monastery Mentors represent absurd, probably insurmountable value if they make it around the table.
Yeah. But so here's one thing you should notice from the play patterns. Rudy did not cast a spell after casting the first mentor, then just played another mentor, which really implies that there's not a spell to play. So I think Bryant kind of knows that he's safe from getting Monk tokened out. And like all of a sudden you see that this game is advantage board clearly in Bryant's side, I think.
Yeah, which I didn't really expect after that back to basics came down. But
I didn't either.
Rudy whiffed on a few draws, and we're just seeing the crushing power of Eldrazi here. And this Mishra's Factory coming into play represents lethal even with something like a Blind Terminus or a Supreme Verdict.
Yep. What a kick in the junk. A flooded strand. Note that Rudy does not have to concede here because he does not know that if Bryant has another land to activate the factory yet.
Correct.
And also, you actually have to take in consideration, what if Rudy had drawn Swords of Ushers this turn? What does the game look like?
I think it's time to go all in. I think it's kind of all or nothing.
Well, Bryant chose not to do that. You can tell because we're in declare attackers. But I think this is going to be effectively checkmate now because Rudy has no creatures and has drawn a Force of Will.
Blooded Strand fetch? Yes. Good play, Rudy. Good play.
Committing ritualistic suicide by fetching.
Yeah, note that even if he draws the Terminus there, the Mishra's Factory still mops up.
Well, across the Terminus there, he gets 2 redraws off the Thought Knot's leaving, right? So
okay. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
He could get into a Snapcaster Mage as a chump blocker.
Or a White Source and a Plow. Because he had not used any plows left, which meant there were 4 plows left in his deck.
Yes, it would have to be one of the plains or tundras naturally, though, not a fetch.
So on Rudy's side, he immediately cut all of the Fluster Storms. This makes sense. You don't really have any spells you want to counter in this matchup. What did... he brought in 2 Disenchant that we cannot currently see, which makes sense because it kills Chalice of the Void.
I'd even consider the EEs as well, because they can sweep Chalice as well as Endless Ones on 0, and they can kill some of the slightly bigger threats, albeit inefficiently.
Yeah, I would probably consider them for the Chalice Endless One thing, not so much for the Mimic Reshaper thing, because I think that's not a great way to use your mana. Oh,
agreed.
Rudy's was so close to being good. It was a Plains, 2 AKs, but no blue source. But
and then on Rudy's side, the most important thing that he would be bringing in is Sorcerer's Spyglass to stop Jace.
Yeah, on Bryant's side, yes.
And you can see the Thorn of Amethyst in as well, just as an additional disruptive element.
Endless One on the top. Wonder if we're going to... Yeah. Bryant scried it to the bottom, and I agree with that decision.
I agree with it as well. You already have a handful of creatures.
Yeah. The most important thing is a soul land, I think, essentially.
Yeah, Thorn of Amethyst on turn 1 is way better than Thorn of Amethyst on turn 2.
It is worth noting he has a soul land, but he has the soul land that only taps for Eldrazi. So I think his hand was a keep. It's just that, obviously, he would have preferred to play the Thorn.
Yeah, so Rudy sitting here with 3 counterspells, so the shields are relatively speaking up.
Yeah, he gets to use a counterspell here, which is great for him. Because you see that Wasteland there? his volcanic island is not very safe, I think.
Oh no.
And
so Rudy may be in trouble. This one might just end very, very quickly here.
I was going to say, Bryant noticed that. He just snaps off the wasteland. And Rudy didn't float mana, but Bryant would have just moved phases anyways, so that doesn't matter. All right, so we see a factory and a reshaper. Good old 3-2 for 3.
And I don't think you use a counterspell on that there, because if you draw a white source, you would much rather just like plow that. You'd rather save the force for something that actually matters. You know, a Thought-Knot Seer, a Reality Smasher, a Chalice.
Here's the funny thing. We might see Cavern Naming Construct relatively soon. Like, think about it.
Yep.
Both Ballistae are constructs.
So and they will just send lasers to the dome.
Oh, yeah. Card's phenomenal. It also, if somehow Bryant just drew lands for the rest of the game, the Cavern on construct thing would be very, very, very lethal very quickly. So I wonder, by playing the second... You played a second temple this turn, correct?
Yes.
The question is, do you attack with both factories, or do you just run out a Ballista on 2? The problem is it can be counterspelled, so I think that's sort of an interesting decision.
It would still be a 2-for-1, which is still fine. But I think if the plan was play Ballista, you might want to just put the Cavern on construct immediately.
That's what I was thinking about. The flip side is most of your deck is not constructs, so it is actually an interesting decision if you're supposed to Cavern on construct or not.
Like further complicating it is the Eye of Ugin that is in hand, because that does provide endgame inevitability, like a Cavern on Eldrazi plus Eye on Bryant's side.
Exactly.
Would be awesome.
So I think it's a difficult decision, and either way it could work out. There are strengths to both. 3 islands, probably want to keep those.
Yeah, I think hitting the land drops is a big deal at this stage. And note that if Bryant wanted to, he could just pump Walking Ballista, swing in until this card is answered. I don't think that's the best option, but it is a very annoying threat.
Yeah, I kind of like this. So the reason to play it pre-combat is if Rudy counterspells, then you get to attack with your factory safely and play a Cavern or an Eye naming something else. And just getting in 3 damage is pretty good. It's factory's a 2/2, but you can use the other factory to pump it. So
5 damage this turn, plus sort of like 2 floating damage from the Ballista at any given time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's looking like it's... I don't know if the Monastery Mentor can do it here. It's going to be hard either way for Rudy.
Yeah, the issue with the Mentor is that the Ballista is there, hanging out, and it can just plow it down. So if he goes, Mentor into Preordain, he can just trade Ballista for the Mentor if he so chooses.
So I believe Rudy did bottom AK, but just drew another one instead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of ironic, but AK, the first AK is not great. Second one, pretty good. Third, fourth one are phenomenal. You might actually see a snap plow on this Ballista, because I think it's going to get out of hand relatively quickly. Or not. We're just thinking about it. It flickered. You can tell when someone clicks on it because it sort of flickers to a different color for a second. Then when you unclick it, it flickers back. You see like that? It flickered back and forth.
So he could Snapcaster, target the swords, block.
Well, he's already in Declare Blocker, so he can't.
Yeah, well, never mind. The value.
There is value here. I'm going to tell you who's deriving the value. I think it's Bryant, because you get to shoot down the Snapcaster and deal 2 to Rudy, making it one of the best Triskelions ever.
Seems good. And the Eldrazi Mimic can also come down post-combat and threaten huge amounts of damage.
That is certainly true. Brian clicked the eye briefly. I don't know if you saw that.
You're about
to click it. Obviously, he doesn't have the 7 mana activated. Wow, that is phenomenal. That actually forces a chump block. Well, actually, here's what you could do. You could.
Oh, this is interesting.
Try to read that token, right?
Yeah, so he can force of will this even though it can't be countered to create a monk token.
I've actually done this for Eldrazi with Vial Smasher and play to kill the Reality Smasher.
Did I not pay the fucking...
Oh my god.
Awkward.
So, chat, here's what happened. Cavern of Souls has 2 different abilities. One lets you tap for colorless. One lets you tap for a color of the chosen creature type and makes it uncounterable.
Yeah, you basically have to add a colored mana. Obviously, that's just a misclick by Bryant. That would never happen in real life because it's basically not possible to do that in real life, I think. The Ballista still might be good enough, frankly speaking. Because look at Rudy's hand, it's a Terminus. You don't actually want to Terminus here.
So this can just be a Ballista for 2 this turn, but it looks like Bryant is not going for that. Looks like he's gonna wait it out.
So advantage to playing the Thorn is that it shuts off Jace. And also if you peel another land, then you can Ballista for 3 next turn instead. So I suspect that's why he did that. And now a Mentor does not get a clean block on this factory.
You just have to extract the little value every little tiny place that you can.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Actually kind of drawing pretty poorly, I think.
Agreed.
Whereas, it's kind of weird. I think Bryant is in a situation where lands or spells are good for him, which makes him an enormous favorite. Look, now you see Bryant tap for blue this time.
Note that he has over tapped due to Eye of Ugin.
I think he might realize that because Moto tells you how much the spell costs.
Playing Moto and playing Paper Magic are very, very different things. For those of you that don't play Moto, sometimes you have to relearn how to play a deck just to understand physically how the interactions work.
Yeah, but I think Rudy is nearly dead now.
The Reality Smasher is going to trample through for at least some bit of damage here.
The answer is 3, I think.
Uh-oh. That seems like a very awkward number.
It does. You don't want that back to basics here. And yeah, Brian takes the first match. Angry spaghetti monsters.
I must admit, I play quite a bit of them, usually off stream, but sometimes I get home and I just want to hate the world and I sleeve up those chalices and thought-knot seers, and they just do work.
My favorite was a Grand Prix, I think, in Detroit, where literally half the field was blue-white Eldrazi. I also played the deck. I combo killed a few of my opponents with Training Grounds.